Welcome to another edition of Consider This. My name is Mike Saunders, and once again, it's my pleasure to be host and moderator of the discussion today. The pooling of brainpower and talents across the globe is gaining in importance as we all face common human and environmental problems. When researchers from different countries and regions of the world collaborate with one another, powerful transformations take place. The entire human family gains from these synergies. But setting up partnerships with colleagues in the same country or even the same institution can be a difficult process. Add different languages, cultures, resources, and other factors into the mix, and, well, things can get a little complicated. Joining us in the studio are three Brock University researchers who have forged partnerships with colleagues in such far-flung areas of the world as Africa, Asia, and Europe. Our guests have all experienced the challenges and triumphs of international collaborations that aid workers, business people, and others doing work overseas that they also go through. Our guests are Joyce Mgombelo with the Department of Teacher Education, Lynn Rempel with the Department of Nursing, and Gary Libben with the Department of Applied Linguistics, who is also the Vice President of Research at Brock University. And we say welcome to you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's begin by going around the table, and you can each introduce yourselves by describing what for you makes international research partnerships successful for you. Joyce, let's begin with you first of all.
I have been involved with research on mathematics education in Tanzania and in focus on enhancing mathematics teaching in primary school in rural and remote areas. So you're asking about what is the success, or what does that mean for me for an international research to be a success is to see that you can give back to the community and you can work with other researchers from other different countries that are experiencing difficult problems, but at the same time have common interest in enhancing mathematics teaching.
Okay, now to Lynn.
I am involved right now in a partnership with some researchers in Vietnam. I've also conducted research in Botswana, and I think that for me the important component of research partnerships is in fact to recognize that the partners must each have something to contribute and recognize the importance of each other's contribution and be able to share and develop something that they would not be able to do alone.
And to Gary.
Well, my situation is perhaps somewhat different in that I didn't really set out to study or work in this country or that country. I'm a psycholinguist and a neurolinguist, and what's interesting to me about that domain is that we're trying to understand something about language representation in the human mind and the human brain. So learn something about how human minds work and how human brains work with respect to language. And it just turns out that you can't do that by only studying English, because it's just one of the many thousands of human languages. I headed a relatively large group, about 35 laboratories around the world in a variety of different languages, different populations. And the intention was, of course, to have the different languages. Through that experience, I discovered the joys of working across cultures as well. That comes as part of the package. And of course, understand the differences that do exist, but yet the great advantage of working together and generating what indeed would be impossible to generate in any one culture, any one country, or any one laboratory.
Okay, so now let's open up the floor to the discussion at hand. And basically, let's begin by outlining the key elements needed to build successful research partnerships with colleagues overseas.
I could start off with something that I've come to accept as a truth, and that is something about partnerships in general, that especially working with really, really busy people who have a lot on their really a lot on their plates. They have to get out. They have to get more out of the partnership than they perceive themselves to put in. And in other words, you have to think that, yeah, I couldn't do this on my own, and that has to be true. It has to remain true. Otherwise, the partnership does not last.
I think I agree with what you're saying, Gary. Not just even the partners, but even ourselves, right? I mean, we have to know that when you collaborate with other people, you will always, as a collective, get more than if you would work individually. And that has been my experience also in my research.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree, and I think that's essentially what I was saying when I was suggesting that both partners have to feel like they have something to contribute to the partnership as well as something to gain from the partnership. And it will never be entirely equal. It's going to ebb and flow, but I think that is crucial.
Building relationships is actually, for me, the most important thing as you work with partners. I think right on before you even start, you have to think about how you are going to start by thinking real hard on building relationships. So if I really give an example for our research, we actually just started by saying, let's go and visit people in Tanzania, communities in Tanzania, and just see who would want to work with us.
It's healthy, because it requires that, I mean, we should do this all the time, but of course we probably don't. It requires that you see the world through someone else's eyes. And in creating those partnerships, you have to do it explicitly. You have to think and discuss what's important to you. And your partner has to say, well, for us it's let's say the publications are very important, or let's say having research infrastructure that they may not have in a particular country is important, and they say that explicitly, and you get to see the world through their eyes. That's a great thing.
The partnerships that I've been engaged in have not been so much where I had a place to go necessarily. I was looking for opportunities, and so was connected with individuals who might have some similar ideas, or who might be able to develop something again to which we could both contribute and have something, a product that we would not have been able to create individually. And so that idea of developing relationships almost came, well, in fact, happened more after the fact. Once I was introduced to someone who could potentially work with me on a project, then we had to deliberately work on that relationship building. And particularly with the Vietnam partnership, that relationship building had to happen via email and Skype. And so the initial relationships, the development of the research project, all happened through those channels. I remember the first face-to-face conversation was over Skype, Christmas Eve, 2 years ago. And my husband and I came home, and my husband John and I have been involved in all our international research we're doing together. And we came home from our church service on Christmas Eve, opened up our computer and met our current co-PI, and started to develop that face-to-face relationship as we worked on a research proposal together. And the face-to-face stuff didn't happen until we actually got the grant and were preparing for our sabbatical leave 10, almost 11 months later. So one of the wonders of the current world is that we in fact could do that remotely without ever having that trip before we had that trip to Vietnam that could give us the face-to-face relationships, which then ended up also being really important for the development of the project.
And I think what you're raising, I mean, I think it's exactly what I would think of, that it's not like you have the relationship and it's done, I think the relationship has to evolve as you go along. I mean, if I might give an example, for us, we are lucky enough to have a funding, which we actually helped us to go there physically and to talk with people and communities and other researchers. But as you say, meeting with people, even the researchers in Tanzania that we met, we joke always talk about this white van that we drove together into the communities. But in fact, being in that small space in a white van, we got to know each other more, even personally, not just academically. But again, it has to evolve, right? I mean, so to get advantage or take advantage of every opportunity that you can to connect, whether that is email, whether that is Skype, what is that? But it evolves as you go along, I think.
Yeah, and I think, in some way, we as researchers and scholars, maybe we have it easy, but easy in a good way, because there's enough common ground. So if I go to a university in Taiwan or teach in Vienna, yes, of course it's different, but it's still, there are students, they take courses, there's a course syllabus, there are professors. I'm familiar with the with the basic layout, and that gives us a huge head start in creating intercultural connections, and because we start really at a much deeper level.
I want to touch on the technology aspect. Lynn mentioned about Skype, for example, being able to connect. Has that really dramatically changed the interaction you have with researchers and colleagues now? I gather the internet's been one of the most dramatic changes that you've seen in the time that you've been working on research projects. Would that be correct?
Absolutely, for me,
Yeah.
and makes a huge difference. Just the fact that it takes no longer or less long to communicate with someone on the other side of the world than it does on the other side of the building.
I would say so myself, really. Again, even when we talk about relationship, again, you have to sustain it, right? And I think technology, not only that you can talk about the issues that you're working on, but it also sustains that relationship or the discussion, whatever that you're talking about. It's amazing, actually.
And in my case, perhaps counterintuitively, actually works out really well because of the time difference, which is mostly annoying for everyone. But because I'm vice president of research, there are things I really cannot do on the research side during the prime daytime hours, and so I do most of my European research very early in the morning, and that's mid-afternoon for them.
Yeah, you're mentioning that time difference. I was thinking in our case, right now, for example, Tanzania is 8 hours ahead of us. So, yeah, so you have to be working in sometimes or talking at some odd hours.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
I will actually go home from this and then set up my meeting for 10 o'clock tonight. So, yeah, we're 12 hours different with Vietnam.
But is there a reluctance from some quarters to take advantage of the technology that's available now? In other words, do some prefer to do business the old-fashioned way, face-to-face, rather than through such vehicles as Skype, for example?
Well, if I can get down to the nuts and bolts of collaborative research, it's not, for me, it's not so much the face-to-face, it's the no homework component that is very important. In other words, if you have I find in my own personal experience, if you have a meeting and then you break off the meeting and you're going to go each do something over the next 2 weeks and come back, odds are there's more happening in that 2-week period than you really think is going to happen. What I really enjoy about international collaboration is I set aside, say, I'm going to work in this laboratory in this country for 4 days. When I arrive there, I'll have nothing else in my mind except that collaboration, and you can get an incredible amount done. In fact, I wish I could do it in my domestic environment. So it actually becomes much more intense, and more comes out of it.
I think you have to have not just one way of communicating. I think face-to-face is still very important. In our project, for example, one of the things that we thought through as we were working on the project is having this symposium or symposia, which we schedule them at least every year. We'll have one symposium that will meet and do something. The first one, in fact, was just the researchers meeting and talking about, the question again and what we want to do so that we have to come to a common understanding. We also talked about ethics, because there's different ways of how the institutions in Tanzania and institutions in Canada work around the question of ethics. And we talked about how we're going to do with the publications. So it was important, I think, to meet face to face at that point and talk about the whole research that we were interested in. And then the other symposium that we did is actually inviting stakeholders and other people and sharing our research and sort of co-creating sort of the knowledge together. But at the same time, as researchers, we needed between those symposiums to connect, and therefore, internet and Skype came to be very much useful for that purpose.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I would agree, the face-to-face was huge, and the idea that you can get an awful lot done in 5 days. We certainly learned last October when we did have our face-to-face meeting. The interesting thing was that then when we were really face-to-face, we were in Vietnam from January to end of June on sabbatical. There were moments where that was a great connection, and then there were many moments because of their busy lives when in fact because we were on sabbatical and had more time and didn't have all the extra homework, were wishing that we would be making more progress, but there wasn't the same amount of communication, and so we moved forward. But it was a different feel from that week in October when it was intense and everybody booked it off, and we just worked really hard at making sure that we had the plans as far, we made as much progress in terms of planning out the intervention as possible. We were just at the beginning of our Grand Challenges Canada project, and so we were needing to be able to, and it's a very, very tight time frame, so we were needing to be able to map it out, and it was amazing how much work we got done during that period. Now coming back to Canada, going back to these Skype meetings and trying really hard to maintain meetings with all of our busy schedules on both sides of the ocean has been much more challenging.
Yeah. Could I mention something about so we've been talking about the doing of research. Could I say something about the product? I'd also like to mention, as Vice President of Research, one of the pleasures that I have most every year is participating in our Brock University We Welcome the World event, and that celebrates the links we have and visitors we have from many different countries, many different disciplines, and there are some speeches and there's some presentations of research. And then we walk around, and it becomes pretty clear that it's not only that it's nice to have international collaboration, it really makes better research. And I was talking to someone recently and thought about why that might be the case. And so here's what I was thinking. That in the best, when you're doing international collaboration, after you actually do the stuff, then you have to sit down and write the article. And then you have to work out, now what does this mean to me? What does this mean to you? And that is a very deep kind of international and intercultural collaboration and communication. And it forces you to write something that really, in a way, is for the entire world. Because the best research is going to be for everyone. And in that previous conversation, I was thinking, well, if the best research is, if you want to write research that's going to make a difference for a long while, you're really writing for a world that hasn't yet been born. and that requires speaking to people you don't know. And doing this across cultures gives you a really big head start in that enterprise, and I find that a lot of fun.
Working with people and contexts that are experiencing probably more extreme problems, you gotta be innovative. You will come out really you will have a really deeper knowledge, because solving some of the problems requires really innovative and creative way of doing research even, and of even getting the product from that. So I agree, because you have to you have to innovate.
I've also found in my own experience, it's personally a good thing. It seems to me that as people living in Canada, yeah, we're privileged. We're privileged in economic ways, in social ways, and my work internationally reminds me, going back to the other point, if you didn't need a collaborator, you wouldn't be there. So there you are on the other side of the world, with obviously there because you need these people, and that this need is bi-directional, puts us in a very good place, I think.
It's interesting that some cultures would feel North American researchers would be, for want of a better expression, I've heard this mentioned, taking over a project. I don't know if it's a fair or an unfair assumption on the part of some. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think that taking over the project is not really the words that I would use, but certainly that depending on where people in different parts of the world are at in terms of their research culture, their faculty, and how much research they've done. Different places, there's more or less desire to have someone from North America taking over and in charge. And so when we were in Botswana, we found that there was actually a fair bit of expectation that that we would provide research ideas, and that we would run research, that we would conduct research and tell them what to do. And so I found that I was working really hard to try to mentor the nursing faculty there, who were relatively junior faculty, and get them to, in fact, identify their own ideas for research and what was important in their context, and building their research capacity. Whereas in Vietnam, what we're finding is at Hanoi School of Public Health, where I'm working, there is a research culture, a more significant research culture, at least within that group of people. And so there is much more give and take, and much less of the sense that I or John and I would have the answers in terms of the research. And so the research project has, in some respects, built more together, and we in fact are building on their research project, a research project that was done before we got there. And we're building onto that because they've already worked on that, that's already happened.
I agree that, it depends on the institution and the people that you're working with. Yeah, and mostly I think I would say you might find yourself working with a lot of emerging researchers in the field. Mm-hmm. So in a way, I would not call taking over, but I think I would say probably providing leadership in the research itself. But yes, you might have more experience maybe in researching the area. However, you probably don't have experience of the context and experience of many other things that in the country.
in my experience, I think working across countries, I find that we probably have less difficulty with one group taking over than each of us has with our respective communities. So one of the things in working with communities, whether they're in Canada or any other country in the world, from a university perspective, is a true collaboration is not one in which universities generate answers and communities therefore are the recipients of those answers. It has to be one in which university researchers ask questions and members of communities ask questions, and you're really working together, and the questions are coming from all domains. That seems to be a challenge that we're getting better at handling. It's still a challenge, and I guess with respect to Canadian leadership, there might be something, but I think it's maybe English leadership, only because English is the de facto language of scholarship around the world. And when you go to write it up, it's going to be in English, and if your partners are not native speakers of English, well, they're going to be depending on you to do a large part of that work.
So what about international researchers meeting you on your home turf here at Brock? Can that present its own set of challenges for you?
Well, for me, they're not challenges. They're wonderful problems to have, and the problem, of course, is one of time. So in my case, I had a visitor that left just a few days ago, came from Germany. I want to make sure that if they're spending all that time and money to be here, that it's as productive as possible for them. But then, as my colleague just mentioned, there I was on the other side, where they have taken off that time. They have nothing else on their agenda except our collaborative research, and I'm doing a balancing act. Frankly, that's a great problem to have.
I'd actually love to have that problem, right? I have not yet been in a position where my collaborators were able to afford to come here, and I do not have the funds to be able to support them to come to North America. So that has not yet happened.
In my case, they didn't come at Brock, but they came to University of Alberta, and it's almost the same ways as Gary was saying, right? When they come here, they have the full week and the full time to work on the project, and we sometimes have not that much time as well. So it happens the same ways. If we go into the institutions, then also they have to balance some of other things that they need to do as well, in addition to working into the project. I don't think there's a problem. I think it's just the way we work.
Yeah, the way I handle it is I end up doing it pretty much all on the weekends. So I'm hosting another group of colleagues, and they're coming the weekend after next, and I know that to make it all worthwhile, it has to start on Friday and finish on Monday. But it seems to me that true scholarship really is international scholarship. Yeah. I enjoy the fact that I really feel that we are a community that really has no borders, and certainly increasingly fewer boundaries. That's a great thing.
I feel really fortunate that I've been able to do this. I've fallen into international research partnerships, actually, and I feel really privileged that I'm able to learn from people in other cultures, in other places, in other parts of the world. Some of the research work that I'm doing, I hopefully could be doing in Canada, and people ask me why I'm not, and it's because those are the opportunities that have presented themselves to me, and so I've grabbed them.
And I guess it does turn out to be the case. If we want to do the best research in the world, it's almost by definition, at least by the principles of probability, going to be international research, because the odds are the best people in the world are not going to be in the same town or the same university, so it's just going to follow from that.
I agree.
I'm wondering if there are any stories that you could share about genuine surprises you might have experienced while working with others in the field of research, either with them coming here or you going there or through electronic media. Could you touch on some of those, perhaps, for want of a better expression, a light bulb moment for you that, that you remember about some of the collaborations you've had and the researchers you've worked with?
I think one of the situations for me, of course, I'm working in a culture that I don't know, and have had with my research team really good cultural interpreters, and so that has helped a lot. You know, we bring our ideas, but they're the ones who have to decide how and whether something can be translated into their cultural context. And so the biggest surprise for us was that we had agreed when we extended the research project that we would develop fathers groups and fathers clubs, peer-led fathers clubs. And so from my North American perspective, that was going to be, and in fact the way we had, we thought we were going to do this was that was going to be someone who is an appropriate person, will identify some of the fathers who are involved in our project, who would make good potential leaders, and they could, with our support, develop these peer support groups for fathers who would be involved in the lives of their infants. We did not realize that the political context would not allow us to do that. And so we, because of a number of factors, were trying to make sure this happened, and we were getting some pushback that we didn't understand until finally someone said, well, really, we have to meet with the politicians. We have to meet with the Women's Union and the Farmers Association, and we have to have all of those people on board, and actually we can't start with just father leaders. We need to have the people who are politically involved to be able to support this by starting it. And then we can develop the father leadership. And then we can see where it goes. And so that was one of those big oops, okay. Didn't catch that, didn't see it coming.
Yeah, I find it's kind of difficult for me, I guess, because I work in a context that I know. Like although of course I've been away for a long time, so the things that would happen in, I would say, oh, I forgot about this, right? So the protocols, for example, I was talking about if you invite somebody from, let's say, from the Minister of Education, with the Permanent Secretary, it is a huge undertaking and a huge protocol. So I see my colleagues from Canada and it's thinking, oh, he's going to come and give a 5 minutes talk and it will be done and gone. No, it won't happen that way. So, but it's things that come up, and then I would say, oh yeah, this is the way it should be, right? And then a tradition that if you expect somebody to come to visit in your community, as we're going into communities, it's a big deal for them. So they prepare food for you. First you have to sit down and eat food, and then you get invited to talk about what you came to talk about. So, but it's all good. It's all good.
Yeah, I've also found it to be all good. Of course, probably like I think many people, you get into trouble, on matters of formality, matters of bureaucracy, matters of what counts as polite and somewhat less than polite in different cultures. But those are all learning opportunities, and I think makes you work harder at paying attention to your environment and reading other people's minds, which is a good thing to do.
Yeah.
Well, let's wrap up the discussion with any concluding thoughts on research collaborations. We'll start with Gary.
I think I see the future as international research is not a nice to have, it's a need to have. So we touched a little bit on matters of technology, and in the absence of that technology, you know, there are things we could not do across borders and across time zones. Now it's kind of not much of an issue. Therefore, we do have not much of an excuse for doing the best research possible, and working with the people that we need wherever they happen to live. I think our community is gonna emerge as leaders and example to others for how this is really easy to do, and has benefits for all involved.
And now to Lynn.
Yeah, I think that research collaborations need to be developed, fostered where they happen, as they happen, and we need to be open to the possibilities that we can do work here, we can do work anywhere in the world, we can learn from people anywhere in the world, and that's an important thing for us to be ready to do, and that we have something to give. We have this ability to share in the creation of knowledge, in making a difference in some small way, someplace where we've been put.
And finally to Joyce.
Well, there's a lot to talk about knowledge mobilization as not just disseminating research, as co-creating of knowledge. And I think international research actually provides that opportunity to co-create knowledge with others. It's a great opportunity, and it creates a sphere of possibilities that you can work and you can be creative and you can be innovative and contribute to the world.
And that's our program for this time out. Consider this. We thank you for listening in, and I thank all three of you for coming into the studio today to make this particular collaboration work so well. Our guests have been Joyce Mgombelo with the Department of Teacher Education, Lynn Rempel with the Department of Nursing, and Gary Libben with the Department of Applied Linguistics, who is also the Vice President of Research at Brock University. Thank you all for coming in today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.